Would you pray with me, please? Holy God, in this second week in Lent, we continue our journey of spirit, of mind, of body, with you, with those who have gone before us, with those who are with us, and those who are yet to come. We ask that your Spirit be with us now. Let it open our hearts and our minds to all of the possibilities in this journey. And just as Jesus walked it before us, as of many others, we ask that as your Spirit was with them, it be with us now. And we ask this, Jesus, in your holy name. Amen. Did you ever see the film Spaceballs? It's not one of Mel Brooks' best films, I have to say. For that, you'd have to go to like Young Frankenstein, etc. But it does have its moments, and there's a bit at the beginning where the wonderful Captain Lone Star, who's played by quite a young Bill Pullman, and this extraordinary robot, this android, that's played by Joan Rivers. She's called Dot Matrix, and this very spoiled princess called Vesper are crashed on this desert planet, and as they leave the spaceship, they're kind of walking through this sand, and as they're walking along, Captain Lone Star is saying, "Water, water, water," and Dot Matrix, who's played by Joan Rivers, is going, "Oil, oil, oil," and the spoiled Princess Vesper is going, "Room service, room service, room service," which would be me, you know. I'm not even good at camping. Never mind, you know, being alone in the desert. When I was 6 or 7, my sister and I went camping in the back garden, and she threw earwigs at me, and that was it. I was off camping for the rest of my life. I didn't, you know, the thought of roughing it, no, I'm a room service guy. You know, give me a nice, warm, comfortable, supportive bed, none of this desert stuff. But the desert is inevitably part of our spiritual journey, whether we want to go there or not. Moses, as Peter was saying last week, had a period in the desert. The Israelites in the desert, a period. Isaiah had a period in the desert. Jesus, a period in the desert. And in the context of our story over this 6-week Lent period, they were all either driven there or led there by the wolf. And I want to explain that, because effectively, Moses was driven into the desert by the teeth of the wolf. Do you remember that Moses killed an Egyptian in order to support a Hebrew slave who was being beaten? And because of that, he literally had to flee into the desert with the wolf at his heels. The wolf being the Egyptian law that would have cast him out as a murderer. And then the Israelites, of course, when they went into the desert, they were at the edge of the Red Sea, and Pharaoh's army was behind them. Talk about having the wolf at your heels. I mean, they had teeth snapping at their heels, because the Israelite army were just behind them. And in front of them was the Red Sea, and the Red Sea opened. God created this extraordinary miracle. The Red Sea opened, and they walked through, and what's on the other side? The Promised Land? No, a desert. So again, it's like, we don't want to go there, but we can't stay here. It's the teeth of the wolf. And then Isaiah. Isaiah, again, as Peter mentioned last week, had this extraordinary event take place where the fire of God had come down and consumed the sacrifice that Isaiah had laid out. And of course, the priests of Baal were all killed. And Jezebel, remember Jezebel? She was the one who basically supported all the priests of Baal. And she hated the fact so much that her priests had lost against Isaiah that she put out a price on his head and said, right, that's it, anybody can bring me back Isaiah's head and they'll be rewarded. So Isaiah fled, literally, at the teeth of the wolf, because Isaiah had to flee into the desert. And of course it was then Isaiah went to the cave, and we know the cave story. Jesus, however, I think was led by the call of the wolf. You know, we don't hear much about Jesus' life story up until the baptism. We know that he was born. We have the nativity narrative, and then we know that at about 12, the family took a trip to Jerusalem, where he got lost. Remember, and they were on the way home before they realised that he was missing. They were like 2 days on the way home. I'm sure my parents would have noticed before then. I wasn't there, but anyway, it was 2 days before they noticed, and they had to go back, and there he was in the temple. That's really all we know about Jesus up until the point of his baptism, up until he was about 30 years old. We don't know what drove him to that baptism. We don't know why Jesus felt the need to go to the River Jordan and give himself to John to be baptized. All we know is that when John met him, John said, "It should be you baptizing me," and Jesus went, "No, actually this is what we'll do." And when he went under the water, the Holy Spirit fell like a dove, and the voice came out, "This is my beloved, in whom I am well pleased." And at that point, Jesus went into the desert. So again, I don't know what it was that happened before that, but whatever it was, the experience in the water, the experience of the baptism, was so much a contrast to that Jesus was then led into the desert. Jesus felt the need to go into the desert and to work out what all of this meant for him. And Jesus, I think, must have felt alone. And the reality is that we always feel alone in the desert. However, we're not. You know, when I was 20 and the JWs threw me out, I was literally chased by the teeth of the wolf into the desert. Because I lived in this closed community for 20 years. I had no idea how the world around me worked. I didn't know the world. I didn't understand the world. I'd grown up in what I thought was kind of this oasis community, and all around me was a desert. And suddenly, I was utterly alone. Of course, I look back and I realized that I wasn't alone. Like an eagle flying above me, God kept an eye on me and helped me through. I've no doubt about that. I had the Samaritans and I had their support. I had the shelter given by the Cyrenians and their support. I had a job that grounded me in a community which I desperately needed. And then at each and every point, when I look back, I can see God's hand moving and helping me along. But at the time, I felt really alone. It's only looking back that I can see the hand of God. And I can imagine it was the same for Jesus. In Deuteronomy 32:10-13, we read, "God sustained him in a desert land, in a howling wilderness waste. God shielded him, cared for him, guarded him as the apple of God's eye. As an eagle stirs up its nest and hovers over its young, as it spreads its wings, takes them up, and bears them aloft on its pinions. The Lord alone guided him. No foreign god was with him. He set him atop the heights of the land and fed him." We've all had times when we've entered the desert, and the desert is simply a place in our life where the emptiness of the world drives us within, and the sun literally just burns off our dross. As Malachi said, God tempers us in a refiner's fire. God uses the heat of the desert to cleanse away the impurities from us in the same way that somebody working with metal would burn off the impurities in silver. That's what Malachi says. And again, sometimes we're driven there, like Moses, Israel, and Elijah. Sometimes we're led there. I mean, quite often I think the journey starts when we begin to understand that the path that we're on is actually taking us round in circles. I don't know about you, but I kind of started off believing in some kind of doctrine that, when I look back at it now, didn't serve me very well. I believe that if we work hard, then we get the rewards. If we believe in Jesus, then everything will be okay. God's love protects us from bad things. What we believe in is the ultimate truth. And success was about what I owned. It's about what I had. But at some point, we realize that there's a chasm, that there's a hole, and that it's getting bigger. There's an ache, a yearning for something that we can't see or understand. There's a feeling that something is missing, that something's just out of reach. And we start to search for the rewards, and we realize that there aren't any. We believe in Jesus, and still life is unfair. We know that God's love is there, but bad things still happen. Our dogma, our beliefs, they don't stand up to close scrutiny. They simply just don't meet life's needs. And we search and we search and we search, but eventually realize that nothing in our life, that no possession, whether it's a dogma or whatever it is, can actually give us what we crave. And this is the journey in the desert. We know we're there because we search harder for the rewards, and there just aren't any. We search harder for Jesus, and life just gets more unfair. We trust that God loves us, and that starts to waver as we see more and more bad things happen. We search for new dogma and new beliefs, a new way of looking at things, and things just feel empty. We realize that it's all kind of hollow and meaningless. Ecclesiastes 1:2 says, "Vanity of vanities," says the preacher. Vanities, all is vanity. And Ecclesiastes 2:1, "I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure, so enjoy yourself, and behold it too was futility." Ruth 1:21, "I went out full, but the Lord brought me back empty." The emptying is painful. We are like a child losing our toys, or a dog having a bone from them, taken from them. When we were doing this, Odie and Pebbles were due to be fed, and Pebbles has a little tablet that I give in some ham. And what happened was I put it down, and Pebbles was going for it, and Odie went to snap it up. And I had to say, "No, Odie, not yours." And the look on his poor face, because all he knew was that she was getting something and he wasn't. That there it was in front of him and I was just taking it away. And his poor little face was like, "Oh, but I want so." Anyway, he got some ham in the end. But our life, everything we trust, whether or not it served us well, whether or not it was good for us, whether or not we even liked it, slips from us, and it's really painful losing it. You know, it's better to be a citizen in a bad country than be a citizen in no country. Better to have a home with problems than to have no home at all. Foxes have dens, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to rest their head. How could he live like that? In the desert, there's nothing around us that can help us. The landscape is empty. Everything becomes sand. The desert demands that we look within, and we don't want to. We're taught that the answers are out there. The answers are in our work. The answers are in our church, or in our family, in our friends, in our beliefs, and in our values. But in the desert, we find that there's nothing out there but sand. Why? Why would the wolf drive us into the desert? Why would the wolf lead us into the desert? Why would we be left so alone? Because it certainly feels like we're alone. There's an eagle flying there, soaring the sky. But as far as we know, it's probably looking for prey. It's nothing to do with us. There's an emptiness here that hurts. Not only are there no answers in the sands of the desert, but even the questions start to get lost. Which way do we go? Is there a way out? which direction. One direction seems very much like another. There may be a shining city on the other side of that sand dune, or there might be 100 miles of sand. How would we know? How do we feed when there's nothing to eat? How do we quench our thirst when there's no water? Why would God abandon us to this emptiness, to the desert? In Ephesians 3:17-19, the Apostle Paul wrote, "So that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may have strength to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and the length and the height and the depth, and to know the love of God that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God." But when that happens, and how that happens, that's Peter's story next week. And until then, the eagle soars above, watching, protecting, and waiting for the next part of your Lenten journey to begin. Amen.